Welcome, brothers, sisters, working class heroes. This is The Rick Smith Show. Thanks so much for being here today on the big program. Lots to get to, lots to talk about. Thank goodness for Rudy Giuliani, the former mayor of New York, Trump's personal lawyer, the guy who did a whole bunch of who knows what over in Ukraine with some shady characters. That Rudy. Rudy evidently was in Philadelphia at an event called Italians for Trump, where he proclaimed that people don't die from the coronavirus anymore. They just don't die anymore. Young people don't die at all, he says. Middle-aged people die very little. And even elderly people have only a 1% chance of dying, which all along the spectrum, wrong. But this is the message that the Republicans are trying to throw out there. This is what they're trying to tell us. It's nothing to worry about. You're gonna be fine. And if you get it, well, we'll brush it under the rug when you do die, which is what I think we're seeing in some places where the numbers, you gotta wonder. You just gotta wonder. And interestingly enough, we're going through this moment where the Republicans are moving past the virus. They're doing absolutely nothing. In fact, Trump is back on the campaign trail, having these enormous rallies and bringing, thousands of people together in these super spreader events. So, yeah, we've got patient zero in a super spreader event kind of scenario. And you've got this nomination, this Supreme Court confirmation going on, which we all know. We're all very clear on the reality of what this seat means. It means the end of Roe versus Wade, and it means the end of the Affordable Care Act, the dreaded Obamacare. And she's been propped up to do just that. And I got to tell you, on day 2 of the Dog and Pony show, mad props to Rhode Island Senator Sheldon Whitehouse. I mean, so spot on. In his opening statement, he says, Americans are worried about one thing above all else right now, and that's our health. He said this hearing itself is a microcosm of Trump's dangerous ineptitude in dealing with the COVID-19 pandemic. Trump can't even keep the White House safe. Here, it's the chairman's job to see that the committee is safe. He said, and through his words, though his words were reassuring, I don't know who's been tested. I don't know who should be tested, who was a danger, what contact tracing has been done on infected and exposed senators and staff. Nothing. The whole thing, just like Trump, is an irresponsible botch. And you go, yeah, I mean, that pretty much sums up the last several months. And, while they're having this hearing, which is really just, this is just, come on, this is political theater. There's no stopping this nomination. And, I agreed with Rush Limbaugh. They should have just voted her in because no matter what the Democrats bring up or say, it's not going to change their mind. There are no patriots among them. There are no statesmen among them. These are people who are ideologues. Our team won. Our team has the power. We're going to impose our will upon you. And the reality is, as White House pointed out, just a week after Election Day, literally 7 days on November 10th, the Supreme Court calendar is set to hear California versus Texas, which is the constitutional challenge to the ACA. This is what's been teed up to undo the dreaded Obamacare. And she's going to sit on that. And the reality is she's gone nowhere near answering any questions on how we know she's going to go. But you can look at her writings. You can look at the things that she's said. And it all points to it's the end of the ACA in the middle of a pandemic. So here's the thing. And I've said this a bunch of times now. There's no stopping this nomination. We're going to have a 6-3 court. The ACA is done. Like it or not, I just see this as the reality. This is the end of the Affordable Care Act for millions of people. Now, if the Republicans really, and this is the part that I know you're not going to come with me on, because there are no patriots there, there are no statesmen, there are no lawmakers there. There are ideologues and power hungry. I'm going to be nice. If they know, and they do, everyone knows, it's the end of the ACA. Donald Trump's running around saying the Republicans have a better plan. It's going to cover everybody. It's going to cover everything. And it's going to be cheaper and better. He said, our plan's the greatest ever. They're going to make healthcare great again. Yet they don't have a plan. And I've been saying for the longest time, look, I'm okay with the ACA going away. You want the ACA to drop? I'm okay with that. As long as you're going to replace it with something better. So tell me what the replacement is. Show me what the replacement is. And they're not doing that. And we could have been doing these months. Instead of having this rushed sham of a hearing, we could have been talking about health care. We could have been talking about, okay, it's over. Just ram it through. You're going to ram it through anyway. Have a one-day vote. She's in. You've chosen her. It's a party line vote. She's on the court. She undoes the ACA. What are you going to replace it with? And I thought Kamala Harris was spot on in saying, look, you're going to rush through this nominee while Americans are stranded. What are you going to do? And the answer is nothing. The answer is we know what they're going to do. The answer is they have no plan. There's nothing there. There's no there. And what it's going to mean is during a pandemic, millions of people are immediately going to lose their health care. I mean, once they rule this unconstitutional, once it comes out, boom, it's done. There's no, we're going to have a waiting period and we'll ease into it. No, you better have a policy day one. You better have that policy in place because people are going to struggle. And I know these folks don't really care about that. I know. Completely get that. I'm trying to give them the benefit of the doubt that if they did, they'd be doing their jobs. But here's the reality. We know they don't care because they would have been using these last couple of months to actually, I don't know, prepare for what's coming, to make sure that we had another stimulus bill so that the economy doesn't completely tank. Because we're standing on the edge looking over into the abyss. We're marching towards it. And we've had a Senate. This is the Senate. The House has done its work. Even, and this, I can't believe I'm saying this, even the president himself wants a stimulus. I know for a moment he said no, he didn't, but he's now back on the bandwagon. In fact, he tweeted out today in bold capital letters, stimulus with an exclamation point. Go big or go home. And yet the Republicans have done nothing. Now, maybe that has kind of pushed because Mitch McConnell has said, well, maybe next week. Maybe next week we'll look at some targeted relief. Maybe next week. Which that means, special interests are going to be very well fed. And the folks on the bottom are going to get screwed. Now, again, they keep using the words, well, we want more aid for small businesses. Well, I'd like a definition on that, please. Halliburton during the Bush years was not a small business. Some of these big companies that we're now finding out were taking huge amounts of money. Those weren't small business. When I think of small business, I think of the mom and pop down on Main Street. And the thing that gets me is I saw this argument by one of the guys from the Shark Tank thing. His name's Kevin O'Leary. He's the CEO of EFT. Interesting guy. I watched some of his stuff. He's also a contributor on one of the, I think CNBC he's a contributor on. He made the argument that I've been making for a very long time. Businesses should get nothing. Corporate America shouldn't get a dime. Now understand, this is a rich guy. This is a guy who runs one of these financial institutions, one of these kind of hedge funds, saying corporate America should get nothing. Business shareholders should get nothing because that's what the risk is about. And I've been saying this for decades. For too long, we've been bailing out the shareholders. We've been making the wealthy even wealthier by taking risk out of it. So not only do we slash their taxes down to nothing, we insulate them from the risk that comes with losses. So we're in this moment, and what do we do? $500 billion slush fund for the very wealthy to stick their snouts in, while then begrudging people of an extra couple $100 a week in unemployment. Now this guy's saying, look, I'd like to see $400 a week for the unemployed for the next 14 months. Let that sink in. This is a rich guy saying, all those people who were affected, all the people who've lost their jobs, all the people who aren't going back to work in the airlines and in the restaurants and all of these places that have been shut down and might not come back, for the next 14 months, we give them unemployment plus an additional $400. We prop it up. And we make sure that they make it through. And they keep the money spending. Because look, he doesn't care about these poor people. He doesn't care about the poor or the downtrodden. What he understands is business. He understands that if you give those people money, they're going to spend it. And where are they going to spend it? In those businesses that are failing, that those shareholders are going to probably lose their money if they fail. So it's not a matter of they're not bailing out the shareholders. They are. But in this equation, as I've said a million times, you're helping the little guy. And the little guy is going to make it through. He's going to be able to put food on the table, keep a roof over his head, pay the electric bill, pay the water bill, make sure the kids got sugar and shoes and all the things that they need to go to school and thrive and survive. And that money's going to flow upward to people like him. That's what we should be doing. Even, his fellow Shark Tank guy, Mark Cuban, back, I think in the middle of September, said we should be giving every American, regardless of your income level, regardless of your employment level, regardless of anything, should get $1,000 every 2 weeks. We should be just handing out cash, $1,000 every 2 weeks for the next 2 months. So all the way through election time, $1,000 every 2 weeks for the next 2 months. But the catch, and here's again, bailing out the wealthy. His part of it, the caveat, you got to spend that check in 10 days or you lose it. There's no saving it. There's no, I'm going to squirrel it away for a rainy day. I got $1,000. I got to use it. And that stimulus, again, I know it's a dirty, dirty S word. I know stimulus is bad, except when Trump does it through a massive tax cut for the very wealthy. But hey, I digress. But that kind of a stimulus will boost the local economy. That reverberation effect through the local economy would be fantastic. And it's something that I've been advocating for, almost every day I've done this show for the last 15 years. Because we know if you give money to the guy at the bottom, he's going to spend every dime of it. And it's going to stay locally, and it's going to reverberate through the economy, and it's going to help lift everybody. Instead of going, here, rich guy, here, take a boatload of bailout money, and you're going to buy another yacht or a ninth home? Good for you. It's time that we start caring about the working people of this country. And it's bizarre. It's really weird to me that it's a couple of rich guys who are going, yeah, this is what we got to do. We need to get money into people's hands. It's really bizarre to me. And when you talk about universal basic income, and I love doing this with my Republican friends who say, oh, you're just giving stuff away, just to be for the lazy and the shiftless. Or when I fight back against, the lower tax rates. I always like to throw back, it was a Republican idea. It was a very conservative idea. In fact, Uncle Milton Friedman, it was his idea. Universal basic income was Milton Friedman's idea. He called it a negative tax, where they were going to give, I think it was like $6,000 a year to every person in a household. So a family of 5 would get $30,000 a year. And there was some calculation on that if you made $1 million a year, they'd pull it back. But it made sure that everyone had a reasonable standard of living. And what it also did is said, we don't have to keep raising the minimum wage. We don't have to keep doing all this other stuff. We can prop up people's spending. We can prop up their standard of living by redistributing wealth in a way that helps the folks on the bottom do well, but also the people at the top. Because guess what? Again, back to the guy that I started with, who understands, don't bail out any of these CEOs, don't bail out any of these companies. The heck with them. They all know that if you give the money to the people at the bottom, it will rise up. You're going to go to that store. You're going to use that cell phone. You're going to purchase the cars. You're going to do all the things that you have to do in life just to get by, and you're going to be able to pay for it. And that money's going to go upwards to the shareholders and the CEOs, and everything's going to be fine. See, this whole utopian capitalist view of the world completely stops when we consumers, when we're broke, when people are worried about, hey, can I pay my rent? When people are worried about, hey, can I put food on the table? You know what they're not doing? They're not running out buying cars. They're not running out taking big vacations. They're not renovating their homes. They're not doing big ticket anything because they're worried about the day after tomorrow. And this is where policyholders, this is where the policymakers in our capitals have failed us. This is where Mitch McConnell, and I put all of this on the doorstep of the Senate Majority Leader, because Democrats have done their work. They've passed like 500 pieces of legislation that are never going to see even a consideration in the Senate, because McConnell, again, has said, I'm just not doing my job. Reminiscent of 2016, when Merrick Garland was nominated by Barack Obama, he just said, I'm not doing my job. I'm doing nothing. Because he knows the people of Kentucky, as we're seeing right now, they're not going to throw him out, which is twisted and bizarre to me. But he's not doing his job. And he's not going to. So it's going to be interesting to see what kind of political play comes out of next week's talks on some relief. And again, will it be tied 100% to we've got to give immunity to employers? It's going to be an interesting time. I'd love to hear your thoughts, though. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Going to take a quick break. Right back. Stick around.
There's nothing more American than workers standing up, and the union gives a voice to win. On the Rick Smith Show.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 2010. That was the day 33 Chilean miners were finally pulled to safety after being trapped for 69 days. Workers had been mining copper and gold 2,300 feet down at the San Jose mine near the northern city of Copiapo when the mine caved in early August. The company waited several hours to notify authorities, and rescue efforts only began 2 days later. Trapped miners initially tried to escape through ventilation shafts, but found the required ladders missing. Each route they attempted was blocked by fallen rock or threatened additional collapse. A state-owned mining company took over the rescue efforts, and soon they began. As geologist Serena Sorensen noted, prospecting for people. Initial exploratory boreholes failed to locate miners because mineshaft maps had never been updated. Rescuers had no idea whether miners were even still alive. Finally, 17 days later, the 8th borehole reached them. The miners tapped on the drill and taped notes to it, alerting rescuers above that they were indeed alive and well. Food, medicine, and other supplies were lowered down to them as rescue efforts intensified. Mini cameras were also lowered down, and miners videotaped messages of their continued ordeal. They told how they continued to search for possible escape routes and agreed to ration their limited food supplies so they could all survive. The first of 3 drilling plans to free the miners began. It was an international effort. The Chilean Navy consulted with NASA to design and construct the rescue pods. Throughout the entire process, rescuers worked to prevent additional cave-ins and rock falls. Finally, the extraction process began, and in less than 48 hours, all miners emerged as heroes.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
I gotta tell you some good news I saw today being reported from WOSU in Columbus. Evidently last week they wrapped up their voter registration. In fact, to the second highest voter registration they've had since the record high of 2008. They have 8,073,417 voters on the rolls. And like I said, second highest that they've had since the record year of 2008. And Democrats saw a 500,000 jump in registered voters, which got me thinking, now is this, a 500,000, if you had that in 2016, you swing Ohio to a blue state. And, it's got me thinking about the polling. The poll's really tight right now. In fact, the New York Times poll has it at, 45-44 for Biden. The Baldwin Wallace poll puts it at 47-45 for Trump. Overall, it's right dead smack right in there within a percentage of each other. And it got me thinking, wow, in 2016, Trump won Ohio 52-44. So Ohio could be in play. This could be the making of Ohio as a blue state, which, wow, would be something, at least from my perspective, as a kid who grew up in Cleveland, something good. Here to share some thoughts on the possibility of Ohio moving to the blue category. I've asked Ohio State Representative Tavia Golonsky to come talk with us. She represents Ohio's 35th state district. Tavia, thanks for taking time for us.
Thank you for having me. I love this.
No, I saw this and I'm going, this is incredible. Is it possible that you've got this huge surge towards the Democrats? Now, look, Ohio is one of those states that's not partisan like Pennsylvania. You've got like 4.5 million of undeclared, which dwarfs both, is more than both parties. But still, that move kind of tells me something.
It tells me something. And, again, thank you for having me on to talk about this. I'm excited. And it shows what I've been seeing in my district is true. If you remember, Trump won Barberton in 2016. I represent almost the whole city of Barberton. In 2018, I won, a Democrat, every precinct in Barberton, okay? So that should tell you something right there. But what I've seen is something different. People who vote, some person who voted for Trump, a gentleman, contacted me today and said, that's it. I just can't vote for him again. I am, it's because of what he's done about the military and look at where our country is. Here in Ohio, we're in economic free fall.
Right.
We are in this pandemic and try to remember, picture this in your head. The last time I was at the State House was September 1st. And even then, our colleagues across the aisle, the Republicans, weren't wearing masks and they weren't social distancing. They were acting like none of this matters, right? And so, now all that is televised. I've heard from countless people who are Democrats, independents, and people who crossed over who said to me, oh, I'm done. From the State House all the way to the White House, pure Republican corruption, and they don't want any more of it. Ohio doesn't want it.
Yeah, and irresponsible. I mean, look, if you don't care about yourself, that's one thing. And I say this all the time. I wear the mask because I'm being courteous to others. If I'm willing to put myself in harm's way, that's one thing. But being someone who goes, the hell with you, I'm not wearing a mask because I don't care about you. That's the message I think it really sends.
It really does. And so what the other interesting thing is, most of the people who are not wearing masks, they're not even bothering with social distancing. So I don't care about you, but it's
right.
Twice I don't care about you. And it's this, I don't know where the anger is generated from because, we're not enemies. The virus is the enemy, and we should be trying to fight it by washing our hands, practicing social distancing, and wearing a mask. It's the least we can do when we have no cure and we have no vaccine. It's senseless, and it makes me sad because, it'd be one thing if the regular people were walking around acting like this, but we have leaders in Columbus here in Ohio who are doing that, and it's just horribly disappointing. I think we have an allegation of the largest bribery scheme in Ohio history perpetrated by our most recent speaker stepping down from an FBI. And don't forget, I've only been in the legislature 3 years in May, and we've had 4 different speakers.
Wow.
Yeah, that's a lot. I mean, remember, we run every 2 years. First, I was there. We had Rosenberger step down due to an FBI investigation. Then we had Smith for a couple of months. Then we had a big speaker battle. We had Householder. Householder stepped down 80 days ago, I think it is, in the middle of an FBI. And actually, he didn't even step down. He had to be forced out by legislature. When Ohio families, women in particular in the suburbs, see this kind of shenanigans and this type of breach of trust, they go to the ballot box and they express themselves. That's what I predict on November 3rd. It might take a while to get the election results in, but I'm predicting a blue Ohio.
Yeah, I'm hoping. And, one of the things, like I said, I grew up in Cleveland, so I still consider myself attached to Ohio, even though I live in Pennsylvania. And, a lot of my friends here in Pennsylvania, they like to say that, our politics are more corrupt than anyone. And I go, I don't know. Ohio's giving us a run for the money.
Oh, it's embarrassing. And, as a state legislator before this pandemic, when I was able to travel, people that I didn't even know in other states, when we would go to a national conference for state legislators, they would come up to me and go, hey, we know all about your corruption. And that was before the most recent, largest bribery scheme in Ohio history.
Wow.
First of all, let's try to remember, it isn't that you work for me, that I'm supposed to be, just doing whatever I want out here. This is a position of public trust. And so when I first heard about the bribery scheme, first I was just blown away. I was shocked. And then I moved straight over to rage, because people trust us with their money. Whether somebody gives contributions or whatever they do with the people's money or taxes, it's a level of fraud and a level of deceit. And what I'm here to make very clear is we've got nothing to do with it as far as Democrats. It's all straight out Republican corruption from the State House to the White House. We got to vote them out. And every time you turn around and you think you're going to give them a chance, and you think, oh, well, look at President Trump. He passed criminal justice reform. Maybe that's okay. Maybe we don't always agree on issues, but he killed 215,000 people. He knew what this virus was, and he just let it run around. He himself didn't wear a mask. I think he brought some COVID-19 here to Ohio when he came here. Why have our numbers spiked this week? Did you know we recorded over 1,800 cases of COVID? That was a record for us since this pandemic. Right after he comes here. What's that about? And we just crossed 5,000 deaths. It's a travesty.
No, you're right. But, he'll tell you that he's now immune, and he feels better than he ever did before. And thank goodness for our super drugs. And, You said a minute ago that the Republicans are acting like there's nothing going on. Well, that comes from the top. You've got Trump basically saying we're beyond this. In fact, he even goes into some really weird areas of that he got it on purpose because that's what a real leader would do. And then there was the whole, God wanted me to have it, or whatever that was about. Is it any surprise that that's their leader and that's who they follow? That we then find out all of this stuff as it filters down.
Well, I'm old enough to remember 2 serious cults in American history, what went on with Charles Manson and also Jim Jones. If you know anything about cult personality, one of the first things they do is to harm their own members and to see if they can get away with that. He's been doing that, talking about taking away the Affordable Care Act, putting all these judges on the court to pack the court so that then, no decisions will have a good look at them, right? And then finally, knowing that this virus was airborne in February and not telling us, what kind of a leader walks around pleased that their followers are dying?
Yeah.
I mean, there's no other explanation for it. And you can't tell me that he didn't know that herd immunity wasn't a thing. He knew. We have the tapes to prove it. And so the real question is, what kind of enablers, what kind of Ohio Republicans who are all feeding into the White House? The governor is a co-chair of his committee right now today. And so, the governor had a chance not to have over 5,000 people are dead from COVID in Ohio, and those are only the ones we know about. And I hate to get really personal, but can I break in and let you know that my mom is one of the over 7 million people who's recovering from COVID. She reached her 79th birthday by the grace of God. It was April 14th when I got the notification that she tested positive. I almost blacked out. And so none of us have been able to see my mom since March in person. Lucky for her, she got excellent care. But think about this. My mother's in memory care. She didn't bring the virus to anyone. She didn't leave there. She's not allowed. She can't leave there without assistance. Someone brought the virus to her. Yeah. And that type of negligence, when you have a right, we all have a right to be free. This is the home of the free and the brave, right? It comes with responsibilities. And why would Republicans just put that in their back pocket and ignore it? They're the ones who've been preaching all these years, rights but responsibilities. So you don't have a responsibility not to give my mother COVID-19? Sure you do.
No, you're absolutely right. And, the Republican Party used to be or at least they told us they were the party of personal responsibility. That's completely gone out of the window. And now they just look like 2-year-olds in the cereal aisle complaining that they didn't get the sugary cereal.
Well, there you go. And it's offensive to 2-year-olds. And I just want to say one more thing about my mom. Her lungs will never be the same. And so people can walk around, the president can walk around talking about, I've overcome it or whatever. Well, I noticed they threw, a strange cocktail of a mixture of things to get him back. He doesn't once think to himself, the rest of us don't have that type of health care available to us. In fact, we have to sweat it out just even going in for a hangnail to the emergency room to wonder if that's ever going to even be covered. And what's being done about it? Nothing from the White House to the State House in Columbus. It's all corrupt.
Yeah, in fact, these last couple of days we've been hearing from a Supreme Court nominee that many of us believe will be the deciding vote in pitching the Affordable Care Act and taking health care away, what little health care some people have, completely away. And you're spot on. I mean, Donald Trump has the best health care the world can offer. A 6-room suite at Walter Reed Hospital, a helicopter on call, a team of doctors and nurses, and the best whatever he needs at that second. No waits, no, hey, make an appointment and we'll see you later. No, get in line. Everything he could possibly want at the moment he wants it. And there's part of me that goes, either one, he thinks it's like that for everyone, or two, and more probably, he doesn't really care about you or me or anybody else.
Yep, that's exactly right. And along with the president not caring about you or I, who else doesn't care about you? The Senate, moving forward, the majority of the Senate members, ignoring the rest of us who need COVID-19 relief. I just would love to have the remaining $600 million that's available here in COVID funds to be rolled over. You think they'd be worried about that, but no. What they did was they pushed all of us aside and said, we want to focus on this one woman, getting her on the court so that we can try to control women. And here's the problem with that. And I hate it if somebody out there doesn't really understand this. If women seek abortions, they will have abortions. The difference is they will not be safe or legal. And this is what happens in desperation. If you think you can throw people into poverty, take away their food, evict them, just like all over Ohio's 35th district, I see people being evicted left and right, and people are in desperate straits, taking their coins to the grocery store to pay for groceries. If you think people in desperation who find themselves in an unwanted pregnancy won't take desperate acts, you're wrong.
Yep.
They will.
And rich women will get the care that they need. It's going to be the poor women who die. And I remember my mother telling a story of a friend of hers who went to Kentucky for a botched abortion, and she ended up dying from it because of the infection and all that stuff because it wasn't legal in Ohio at the time. And it was one of those things. Now this is going back into the late 60s, but do we really want my daughters to have to go through what their grandmother and her generation went through? And I say no.
Well, right. And what it is once again, as a person who's been a woman for many years, it's misplaced concern. You believe it or not, I don't believe there's anyone who joyfully goes toward having an abortion. We're placing the concern in the wrong place. If we really cared about what happens with children once they're here and what happens with their families, then we would seek a family-sustaining wage.
Yep.
We would seek housing for all. I got homeless people on almost every corner of the highway. I'm bordered by the highway here in Akron, and they're just left and right. I saw a couple of guys fighting each other for the corner one time a couple of weeks ago. That's where we are. And if you think, again, desperate people will do desperate things, and as I've always said before, if you're not experiencing it in your neighborhood, just sit back and wait a little while. They're coming, because part of what we have to do in this great big world of ours is take care of each other. And so you don't need government to solve your problems, but you need government to help you. And by the way, our government got us into this. Donald Trump did.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And at the end of this is why November 3rd is so important. And obviously, I'm hoping that people will have voted already. I've already cast my ballot. I got my mail-in ballot. I filled it out. I dropped it off at the box there at the county election office. Made sure it was done right. Had the envelope stuffed properly. Had the woman at the place double check it for me.
Yeah.
And look, do your due diligence, but make sure your voice is heard. Make sure your ballot is cast. Because this, I think this election is too important, and I think the fact that we've seen so many people in places like Ohio who have come out to register, I think it shows the importance of what people think this election is.
I agree completely, because remember, there are many Ohioans who know that the pandemic is real, and they know that the virus is real. They've watched their fellow Ohioans catch this COVID virus. I've had to write many condolence letters just here in the 35th district. But one of the things I want you to keep in mind is this. Right here in Summit County, today I wanted to vote. I couldn't vote, though, because I found out the line was a minimum of 1 hour long, maximum of 3, maybe 3.5 hours. So I sent my whole family. They were able to vote. My son came by afterwards, and he goes, I can't believe it took us 3.5 hours to vote. And he said to me, Mom, all of it should be by mail. Well, you know who stopped that? Frank LaRose. Once again, the Republican Party. Why don't they want to vote? I think people get it here in Ohio, that if we vote, we're probably not going to vote for them because they make everything harder on us. In the middle of a pandemic, it's hard for me to see how he could even sleep, knowing that old people, sick people, my kid with a pre-existing condition, he made them all stand in hours-long lines where they shouldn't be during the middle of a pandemic in order to vote. And I think it's changed my son, and I think it's changed some Ohioans. They're going to start seeing this for what it is. This party doesn't care about you.
That's it. And I hope the folks there in Ohio will turn their state from red to blue. Tavia, I appreciate the time. Always great talking with you. Thanks so much.
Thank you for having me. Bye-bye now.
Ohio State Representative Tavia Golonsky. I'd love to hear your thoughts. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Quick break. Right back. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show.
The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk.
Went out on strike. More than 1,000 staff members were represented by the United Auto Workers District 65. The workers wanted improvements in their benefits and their wages. They were also concerned by pay discrimination for women and minorities. 2 days before the proposed strike was set to begin, the workers held a rally. Trade union leaders spoke out in support of the clerical staff. In a show of solidarity among Ivy League schools, members of the Clerical Staff Union from Yale University made the trip from New Haven, Connecticut to New York City to support the Columbia workers. The Yale Union had won its first contract just the year before after a 10-week strike. The Yale delegation chanted, "We love you, 65. Oh, yes, we do. We whipped the Ivy League, and you can too." The strike lasted for 5 days. Some of the students formed the support group Students for a Fair Contract and helped pass out leaflets on the picket line. The Teamsters refused to cross the picket lines, stopping deliveries to the campus. According to the Columbia Spectator newspaper, the final contract included significant gains for the members. They won a 6% increase with retroactivity and additional hikes for minority workers, lower deductibles on medical insurance, and non-discriminatory clause and new technology language. The union's victory at Columbia was part of a wave of strikes by clerical workers at some of the nation's top schools. Stanford University went on strike in 1974 and 1982. Cornell's staff held 3 strikes during the 1980s. The workers who run these elite, well-funded institutions were standing up for their rights as workers.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So again, I spent a little time today watching the hearings over the Supreme Court nominee, and for me, I get the healthcare angle. I think the ACA is done. I get the argument on Roe. I think that's done. But for me, the other part of this is her record on workers' rights and where we know the court is going to go. We know that they're going to side with corporate America. We know that's happening. And the fact that, I just found it ironic that one of the cases that she ruled on, she said that it's against the law to discriminate against older workers, but it's permissible to discriminate against older job applicants. So let that sink in a little bit, especially in these times as where a lot of people are losing jobs and trying to find new ones, that there's someone on the Supreme Court who thinks it's A-okay to discriminate based on age while you're looking for a job. You got to wonder how long that takes till it filters down to the rest of it. Anyway, lots going on. Election season. We're just 3 weeks away from the big election. And jobs keeps coming back. I mean, in this moment of pandemic, the idea that we want to bring manufacturing back to the U.S. is something I've been talking about for, 15 years now doing this program. And also the idea of buying American and all of that. And here to share some thoughts on what the president's record has been. Lots of rhetoric, lots of chest thumping, lots of, hey, we're doing all this wonderful stuff. Are there any results? Well, here to share some thoughts, I've asked Owen Herstedt to come talk with us. He's the chief of staff there at the Machinists Union, also the director of trade and globalization. Owen, thanks for taking time for us.
Oh, absolutely, Rick. Good to be back.
So we hear a lot of this rhetoric, don't we? We're bringing jobs back. We're making America great again. Went to places like Ohio and said all those steel jobs were coming back. Went to West Virginia, all those coal jobs are coming back. The numbers aren't there.
Well, not only are they not there, but they're getting worse on it. The Machinists Union put together a list of over 50 plant closings that occurred from 2017 to, prior to COVID. And then we know all the millions of jobs that were lost after that. So we're not seeing them. We're not seeing those jobs come back from China. In fact, some studies indicate those jobs that are leaving China, whatever they are, they're not coming back to the U.S. They're going to other low-cost Asian countries. And guess where else? Mexico. That's where they're going.
And not here back to the U.S. But, and the jobs that are coming back, they're being automated. And we're giving tax breaks to do the automation. And I've argued for a while, this is kind of like, being forced to write your own kick me sign and putting your own kick me sign on your back and then kicking yourself. I mean, it's kind of this incredible scenario that we're paying for our own demise.
So we've lost, over 5 million manufacturing jobs in the past several years. That's no secret. We've seen ghost towns. We've seen what it does to communities and what it does to lives that have been disrupted. The Economic Policy Institute says that nearly 1,800 factories have disappeared during the Trump administration on that. Any job gains we had earlier on have been wiped out since COVID. So we're still waiting. We're still waiting for these promises that jobs were going to be reshored to actually come to fruition. All you have to do is look at companies like Siemens in Burlington, Iowa, or United Technologies in Chula Vista, California. Look at the Harley-Davidson plant that was closed in Kansas City. To know that those promises never were fulfilled.
Yeah, but there's this belief out there, Owen, that Donald Trump is the fighter for working class folks, and I get this all the time from union members that I'm talking to, that they've internalized, they believe. Even if the facts that you're laying out and that I've been talking about for the longest time prove something different, they believe that Donald Trump is fighting for them. How do you break through that when the reality is so much different than what they're selling?
Well, I think things are a little different right now because all it takes is someone to lose their job, someone's neighbor to lose their job, a family member, heck, even a distant family member. And the reality is pretty stark. Not only is it stark because they lost their job, but it's going to be tough finding a new job, particularly because this president has done such a failure of handling COVID. And we're still waiting for an economic stimulus package and an extension of relief programs for all of these workers throughout the country who desperately, desperately need it.
Now, are you as shocked as I am that they've allowed this to go so long? I mean, it's kind of amazing to me that the president and the Republican Senate, that overwhelmingly has so many more vulnerable senators, would allow the ability to give stuff away, go buy them in an election year. It just seems, I don't know, like political malpractice if you're running for office to not want to make sure that your constituents are taken care of.
I like that term, political malpractice. You opened up this segment talking about the Supreme Court hearings. This is an administration, and this is a Senate majority who is trying to rush through a Supreme Court justice in the waning days of this campaign and not addressing the human suffering that is occurring every day because we have an economy that is in the tank. We have people that are growing desperate. America is better than this. It is better than this. And it is shocking the indifference that we're seeing from some of our so-called policymakers when it comes to doing the job that they were sent to Washington to do.
Yeah.
And that is come up with all the things that are needed by the people that need it desperately now.
Well, I mean, the sad reality is, and we've been talking about this on the program for months now. We had the lull over the summer where policymakers were Republicans, and I'm going to blame the Republicans. I'm going to blame Mitch McConnell and the Republican Senate because the Democrats have done their job. They've passed a ton of bills that are just piling up on McConnell's bill, from the HEROES Act to the PRO Act. You go down the list. It's incredible to me because you said we're better than this, and I don't know that anymore. I don't know that we're better than this anymore. I fear this is who we are because I don't see the kind of outrage that I would have expected because people are struggling. People are suffering. People's neighbors are worried about losing their homes and being foreclosed on. And yet maybe November 3rd, I'm going to change my mind because, there's going to be a mass sweep and we're going to throw a lot of these bums out and actually drain the swamp. But I got to tell you, I don't know that we're better than this at this point.
Well, Rick, I obviously am hopeful. I'm hopeful that Americans will step up and carry on the tradition that America has had of helping one another, lifting each other up, because, gosh, that's the only way we're going to get out of this mess, out of the COVID mess, out of the economy mess, out of the swamp that's been created in the last 3.5 years. And all of this other stuff is if we work together and if we vote on that. I think people are really, really have had it. I mean, just think of it. Do we really need to go through this chaos for another 4 years? What about people that aren't working now? Do they really think that in 4 years, if this guy's reelected, they're going to be able to find a job? We need some new answers, and I think we've got them.
Right.
And I think we've got a candidate who can carry through.
No, I mean, but again, I go back to this belief structure because I think Trump is a masterful con man. He is an incredible marketing person. I think he's done an amazing job of getting people to believe that the economy that he inherited and that they stimulated with a massive tax break, stimulated a little bit, with a massive tax break, is something that he built. When the reality is he rode the coattails of what was being built during the Obama years. He was very fortunate, but took all the credit for it. And I think a lot of people have given him that credit. Now, I know a lot of unions have endorsed Joe Biden, and I hear it from people all the time. What's the difference between Trump and Joe Biden? And I've got 1,000 reasons, but I'm curious what your and the machinist union's view is.
Well, we've laid out a pretty solid policy paper, I think, that compares the Biden plan for rebuilding manufacturing with the Trump promises that have been broken. And what we find in the Biden manufacturing plan are a series of detailed proposals. One, that would strengthen Buy American laws. You know, we spend billions and billions of dollars on the government buying goods. We need to make sure that those goods are bought under Buy American laws. And unlike Trump, who has issued executive orders that basically declare how important it is, but they don't really tighten up the rules, we know that under the Biden manufacturing plan, several things are going to take place. One, they're going to take that domestic content requirement seriously, so that when someone says they're buying American, it really means they're buying an American-made good or American-made steel or iron, etc. on it. But they're also going to tighten up the waivers, all those exceptions that have been absolutely abused by, throughout government, throughout time of it. In addition to that, they're going to hopefully institute some uniform applications of those rules across the federal government. I mean, how hard can it be to make sure that every federal agency applies Buy American the same way, with strong standards, narrow exceptions when it comes to that?
Yeah,
that's one thing.
No, I mean, and the important part of that is I know there are a number of organizations who have looked at our military procurement, and we've given way too many exemptions to the Berry Amendment. We're way too dependent on China and other countries for not just our military needs, but for our national security needs. And I think this pandemic has really exposed just how dependent on the rest of the world we are for our security and our safety.
I couldn't agree with you more, Rick. And right after COVID began and we started to realize the vulnerability of these supply chains. Now, I'm going to back up. I'm going to say the Machinists Union and other labor unions have been crying foul when it came to these supply chains moving out of our country for years on that. But we had high up officials in the Defense Department who were noting that we weren't getting parts in from Mexico for, much needed defense supply chains. Well, there was a reason for that, obviously. Workers couldn't go to factories in Mexico under the unsafe conditions that existed here at home in the US as well. But the real question was, why did we let those supply chains get away in the first place? Why have we let all sorts of basic manufacturing get away to Mexico, to China, and to elsewhere throughout the world, countries that still have yet to really honor fundamental human rights, like the basic right to form a union and engage in collective bargaining and work with your fellow workers to better your lives and your fellow workers' lives.
Now, my Trump supporter friends tell me, Owen, that, to your point, Donald Trump renegotiated NAFTA. It's no longer the Bill Clinton, Ronald Reagan, George H.W. Bush NAFTA. This is the Donald Trump version of NAFTA, or the USMCA. And they tell me that it addresses that very issue that you're talking about. I'm curious your thoughts of the Trump NAFTA.
First of all, the labor provisions in USMCA were greatly improved, and they were improved because of organized labor and because of organized labor's allies, and of course, because of strong-willed folks on the Democratic side of the House of Representatives that push that through. That said, we're having a little trouble finding in USMCA where it says that a company can't outsource work to Mexico. Case in point, a company called Freight Car America. We, the Machinists, represented them in Virginia. TCU IAM represented them in Virginia. They announced they were shutting down and moving the work to Alabama and to Mexico. And then several days later, actually a few weeks later, they announced, this was after USMCA went into effect, they announced that they would be shutting the plant down in Alabama and moving that work to Mexico. So tell me where USMCA says to a company, you can't flee the workers that made your company such a success in the US and head to Mexico.
Again, it's another one of these examples of lots of good rhetoric, lots of good talking points, lots of PR, but at the end of the day, we're the working people still getting the short end of the stick.
Well, we can do better. And this is what I'm saying. And it's time that we do better. Folks are hungry. Folks need the U.S. government, and they need real leadership to get us out of this hole.
So, what do you say to the fact that we're just not seeing these companies come back? I've said we're not going to see them come back. I've said for a while we're not going to get the manufacturing back we've lost. I would like to hold on to the things that we're developing. I would like to make sure that we, the new technologies we hold on to, the new jobs we're able to hold on to. But I'm not seeing that happen either. I'm curious your thought.
Well, I think we need fundamental programs, and we need leadership in Washington to do several things. One, we need a multi-billion-dollar investment in innovation and new technology, which, Biden's got in his manufacturing plan. And we need to make sure that that equipment, that new technology is built right here in the US, that we just don't ship off that technology like we've done in the past, and that we retain that. So that's one area of it. But we also need to take away all these incentives that corporations have to actually move work offshore. I think we can rebuild manufacturing in this country. And I think we can do it in a sustainable way and in a robust way, but we need the leadership to get it done. And we need to do it comprehensively. We need to involve tax policy and economic policy and trade policy and training and education and all of these other things working hand in hand to get the job done.
I'm right there with you. At the end of the day, as I've said a million times, if you don't make stuff, you're kind of screwed. And we're seeing this right now throughout this whole process. But Owen, I appreciate you taking some time for us, sharing your thoughts. As always, thank you so much, sir.
Great to be here, Rick. Take care. Bye.
Thanks so much, Owen Hernstead. He's the Chief of Staff there at the Machinist Union, also the Director of the Trade and Globalization Department. I'd love to hear your thoughts. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Tell me what you think. Should we be enforcing strong Buy American provisions? I think we should. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Quick break. Right back.
Remembering that united we bargain, divided we beg. Rick Smith.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 2000. That was the day that newspaper carriers for the San Jose Mercury News ended their walkout. 80% of the newspaper carriers were Vietnamese immigrants to the United States. Many were elderly or recent immigrants with families. The paper carriers often had to get up in the wee hours of the morning to complete their routes. They earned about $6 an hour. The carriers would also have money taken from their paychecks for the people on their routes who were delinquent in paying for their papers. San Jose is part of the tech industry growth of California's Silicon Valley. The economic disparity between the rich and the poor and working class in the area is stark. The newspaper deliverers were classified as independent contractors, meaning they legally had no protections and could not join a union. They knew that they had to work together if they wanted to improve their wages, their hours, and conditions. One carrier explained that the workers' concerns were, quote, thrown in the garbage by our supervisors. The carriers appointed John Hao-Do as their spokesperson. They demanded a 20% raise. When management would not listen to their demands, carriers on nearly 50% of the routes stopped delivering the newspapers. The walkout lasted 6 days. At the peak of the action, nearly 50,000 newspapers had gone undelivered. 557 carriers participated in the walkout. Finally, management agreed to a 12% raise. They also agreed to end the practice of garnishing wages for delinquent subscription fees. The paper also reinstated 4 workers who had been fired due to the walkout. The newspaper carriers had shown the power of collective action. Extra, extra, read all about it. Workers stand together and win better wages, hours, and conditions. Now that's a headline worth reporting. Like what you hear? Check out more at laborhistoryin2.com.
If you're a rich Republican who's been in the U.S. House so long and done so little that you're essentially seen as a piece of congressional furniture, what do you do when faced back home with a popular, well-organized grassroots opponent who's about to overtake you? How about unleashing your inner racist to assail your challenger as a demonic civil liberties zealot who will let hordes of black, Latino, and other criminal elements rampage through white neighborhoods? Endangered Republican incumbents across the country are resorting to this shameful Jim Crow political tactic in a panicky effort to deflect attention from their own do-nothing records. Take longtime Texas Congressman Michael McCall, who's used to strolling to victory. But oops, in September, with only weeks to go in his re-election race, he found himself in a dead heat with Democrat Mike Siegel, a former school teacher with a progressive populist program of Medicare for all, worker and environmental protections, human rights over corporate greed, etc. Siegel has forged a surging and enthusiastic movement for change. So here comes McCall with a last-minute down-and-dirty $1 million TV blitz, howling that Siegel is a crazed criminal justice radical who'll shut down the police and empty the prisons. McCall himself doesn't appear in this ludicrous dog whistle piece of racist fabrication. Instead, he's put up a white Republican constable wearing his official uniform on camera to do the dirty work. The partisan constable cartoonishly tries to gin up voter fear. "Take it from me," he dramatically intones, "Mike Siegel is a threat to your family." This is Jim Hightower saying, problem is, McCall's gun-toting goofball of a frontman is a notorious right-wing race baiter. But he's just the dummy. McCall is the despicable ventriloquist, mouthing fear and hate in a pathetic attempt to save his worthless political hide.
Hightower's commentaries are brought to you by the Hightower Lowdown, the monthly newsletter with Hightower's take on what Wall Street and Washington are up to. For information, visit hightowerlowdown.org.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So, as I've been telling you guys for months now, this administration's terrible for organized workers. From virtually having instant decertification votes to ending what had always been kind of somewhat an even playing field for stewards and management when talking about a worker's grievance or something having to do with a worker on the job. All this stuff is being smashed. I mean, we're talking 70 plus years of precedent just being tossed out the window. The pendulum swinging way, way too far to the side of management. And the thing is even when the pendulum wasn't this far, their dirty tricks and their tactics almost never got called out. And my next guest is a longtime union organizer who's written a couple of books here about his experiences. Back in 2017, he wrote The Jackson Project, War in the American Workplace, and most recently, his story about the union busting campaign, which took place at Mohawk Industry. The book's titled Fighting Union Busters in a Carolina Carpet Mill. Phil Cohen, thanks for taking time for us.
And thank you. Glad to be back, Rick.
So, you're one of the guys that, I've followed for a while. Your Jackson Project book was fantastic. You're one of the guys on the front lines that's fighting every day to keep what little power workers have in the workplace. And again, this is another one of these tales of, the little guy fighting the good fight. And in this case, actually coming out okay.
Yeah, that's right. This was this was kind of a classic David and Goliath battle. And to kind of lead your audience into it, I retired full-time from the union in 2011. But my title was Special Projects Coordinator, and my role was to go into hot situations that most folks couldn't handle when going by the book just didn't work anymore. and doing what I had to do to bring the union out on top by any means necessary. And one of the areas in which I had a great deal of experience was successfully fighting professional union busters. So between 2011 and 17, I wrote the Jackson Project and went through the process of, promoting the book and what normally happens after you write a book. In November of 2017, the union asked me to come out of retirement and investigate and expose an illegal union busting plot by Mohawk Industries, which is a Fortune 500 company, at its carpet mill in Eden, North Carolina, a place where we'd had a local for around 80 years. And despite my experience, almost as soon as my boots hit the ground, I encountered a whole new playing field. Just a whole new set of rules like nothing I had ever dealt with, and I'd been through some very, very vicious deserts before. The company naturally had hired, a high-profile union-busting law firm. This particular attorney's name was Frederick Engelhardt, and he used a tactic I had never seen before. Normally, an NLRB case is, investigated and adjudicated at a regional level.
Right.
In my case, it's the regional office in Winston-Salem, and the 5-person panel that governs the NLRB doesn't really get involved unless the losing party at the regional level appeals. But in this case, the company attorney almost immediately, once he saw that we were really getting witnesses to come forward and presenting some really damning evidence against Mohawk Industries, he began filing his 50-page briefs directly to the NLRB in Washington, asking that our evidence be thrown out on obscure legal technicalities, not trying to rebut the quality of the evidence itself, but doing the same thing that a lawyer, for John Gotti would have done.
Yeah.
Saying, forget whether or not he killed somebody, these legal technicalities mean we shouldn't consider the evidence.
Yeah, and I got to think that had everything to do with, in D.C. you have a stacked NLRB. You got Trump's NLRB, so you're going to go there to the friendly court.
Yeah, that's right. And, look, I've dealt with the NLRB under every administration since George Bush Sr. And the NLRB, for those of in your audience who are not fully familiar with it, it was established by Franklin Roosevelt as part of the New Deal as supposedly a neutral agency to adjudicate issues and potential labor law violations between unions and companies. And naturally, if you had a Republican in office, it swung a little bit to the right. You had a Democrat in office, it swung a little bit to the left. But all said and done, it remained a reasonably neutral agency bound by our system of checks and balances. But the Trump NLRB has been appointed with the unique role of simply pulling the agency's teeth and dismantling the very laws that it's set to interpret and defend.
Right.
And the other interesting part of this situation is that the National Right to Work Committee inserted itself into the process within the first couple of months. They became the attorneys representing the anti-union petitioner. And they and the company's attorney petitioned the NLRB to use our situation as a test case to repeal the very laws upon which our case was based and upon which every victory over decertification that I've had over the decades has been based. So that's really the purpose of the Trump NLRB. And we had to really put on a monumental case to take them on.
No, and I remember back, 2017, 2018, I think we actually had people on back then talking about this and what was going on down there, because I remember it. It was right around Super Bowl time, if I'm not mistaken. I remember this, and I remember at the time going, this is going to be bad because this is setting that thing in line that's going to allow the Trump administration to just wipe out, 70 years of precedence, and again have the pendulum swing to the extreme, which is why we're seeing these decisions, I think, coming out of the NLRB now, especially around desert votes and changing what had been the precedent for decades.
Yep, that's exactly right. I mean, Trump is in essence waging a war of genocide against the American labor movement. He's not trying to restrict the American labor movement. He's trying to destroy it.
Yeah.
But then what do you expect? Because he is an icon of corporate America.
But here's the thing that gets me,
Phil. It's astonishing how many working people voted for an icon of corporate America.
No, this is where I was going. I mean, the sad reality is a lot of union people, I know a lot of union folks who voted for him and are diehard supporters of his because they don't believe what you're saying. They don't believe that the administration is being overly hostile to organized workers. They don't believe that they're any worse than say the Obama administration was. Because immediately when I start saying, they've done this, this is exactly how it, the stewards thing, for instance. I mean, they're in the GM decision. They are changing what can happen in a meeting between labor and management.
Right.
The pendulum is swinging, and I get people telling me that's not actually happening.
Listen, I'll tell you my personal opinion, and I view everything from the perspective of people. Because, I'm a boots-on-the-ground soldier, and at the end of the day,
Right.
It all comes down to people against people. Working people, or to be more accurate about it, a certain breed of working people identify with Trump because he comes across as a tough guy. They like his machismo.
Yeah.
Truth is, he's a daddy-bought rich kid. Never got dirt under his fingernails 1 minute in his life. But nonetheless, he's got this tough guy image, and certain working people identify with that. And it's really unfortunate. But I'll tell you something. The single largest demographic in the United States is gullible, ignorant people. I mean, people in Europe, I've done a lot of traveling, and, folks in Europe are just absolutely dumbfounded by the level of gullibility and willful ignorance that a significant number of the American people have, and it was just enough to get Trump elected the first time. I'm hoping it will be not quite enough to get him reelected next month.
No, I fear this latest COVID stunt, which I'm viewing as a stunt at this point, will then solidify that tough guy image and make this a lot closer race than people want to believe it is. And the fear is, as I said in a speech I gave the other day, 4 more years of Donald Trump in the White House, the labor movement will basically be illegal.
And you're right about that. I mean, that's where he wants to go with this. He's already brought out, kind of the rhetoric from the 1920s that the labor movement is a threat to national security. I mean, I've spent 30 years presenting cases to federal agents, enforcing federal law, but now suddenly I'm a threat to national security.
So I'm looking at this, Phil, because, the sad reality is, and getting back to your book, where, this victory you guys had just a couple of short years ago, I don't know is possible in this day. So, it seems to me that the attacks are going to be coming more frequently from these big companies as they try and shed their organized workers and take us back to poverty, wages, and desperation conditions. I guess I shouldn't pose it as a statement, but as a question. Do you see that? Do you see this victory you guys had just a couple of years ago as something going forward would be even possible?
It would be more difficult given recent NLRB decisions. Every desert that I've defeated, and I have never had a union locally certified on my watch. And in every case, it was the blocking charge policy enacted several months after Roosevelt created the NLRB, which essentially says that if there is a decertification petition in the works or already been filed, but the union can present compelling evidence, like a prima facie case of illegal management involvement, the election is put on hold until the charges are investigated. And if those charges are found to have merit, the petition is thrown out. And the blocking charge policy, which they were unsuccessful in using the Mohawk situation as the basis to repeal, has since been repealed. And it means that even if the union has compelling evidence of management involvement, the election takes place anyway. But then the ballots aren't counted until the charges are adjudicated.
Right.
But what that does is it leaves a local in a state of flux, possibly for years. Do we or don't we have a union? If for some reason, especially under, an ongoing Trump NLRB, were that to be the case, unions start losing more and more meritorious cases. And then the ballots do get counted. Some of those people who voted are going to be people who were successfully intimidated by management. And there was one of our lawyers pointed out during the campaign itself, when these changes were already afoot, that a study at a major university showed that if somebody is coerced into doing something they don't want to do, they rationalize it by ending up changing sides and supporting the coercing party so they can simply feel, good about themselves, meaning somebody whose arm is twisted to sign a decertification petition is much more likely to vote in an election against the union simply to maintain a consistency with what they were forced to do.
Right, kind of like a workplace Stockholm syndrome.
Yeah, exactly. You got it in a nutshell.
And these are illegal activities that these employers do. And look, I've seen these things happen over the years, where in your case it was extreme. They were out and out blatant about it. As I understand, they actually let a couple of workers just not work anymore and just go around free flowing.
They paid actually like 5 or 6 workers. Their job was to go around the plant and solicit signatures. Imagine if, a local union officer went into another department and tried to sign a union card. If he didn't get fired, he'd be suspended. And yet these people were paid to do that. Beyond that, they were actually, one of them, the petitioner, would actually sometimes come to work in business clothes and sit in the front office, and people would get instructed by their supervisor to go up to the front office and meet with her. Beyond that, the capital offense of union busting is management directly soliciting signatures.
Right.
And we implicated 3 members of management, one of them from the corporate office, in repeated cases of directly soliciting signatures. And what was astonishing about the testimony here is that, they naturally went after people that they thought would be weak links and wouldn't come forward. Meaning, this is North Carolina, it's in the right-to-work heart of the world. And so they went after non-members. And they pushed some, and the trick was we actually got some of these non-members to come forward and testify. I presented more non-members in this NLRB case than in my entire career put together. And they just underestimated their people. They pissed some people off so deeply with just the extent of their strong-arm coercion that even though they weren't members of the union, we were able to convince them to come forward. That
speaks volumes. And all this stuff is in the book, Fighting Union Busters in a Carolina Carpet Mill. You can find this if you go to fightingunionbusters.org. We'll get links out on how you can take a look at and get a copy of the book, because I think these are stories that we especially in this moment, Phil, these are stories that I think the working class of this country really has to absorb, because I think the pendulum is going to continue to swing a little bit for some time. And I think it's going to take a much more militant working class to stand up, step forward, and speak out, as these heroic folks did at the Mohawk Industries plant, for this pendulum to begin to swing back.
Yeah,
even if Joe Biden is elected, even if we get a Democratic Congress and a Democratic Senate and House and all of that, the pendulum is still on the
We're
side of
still gonna
employers
have
right now.
Trump, an NLRB dominated by Trump appointees for another 18 months. And just to add something, the book's available wherever people like books if they don't want to bother going to my website. It has links to all the vendors on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, IndieBound. Everybody's got it. And it's a good action story. You know, there's a lot of it. There's probably more information about the inside workings of a company-sponsored decertification and how to beat it than has ever been put down in a book. It's an insider's perspective, but it's in the context of an entertaining, action-packed thriller that people will enjoy reading while they're educated.
No, and that's so important, especially in what I think we're coming up to in the next several months. And you know, I've been saying for quite some time, you know, maybe things have to get so bad that the only way things get better is things have to get so bad, and we become a much more militant working class. Because look,
the thing that's really important, Rick, is somehow we got to figure out how to make the millennials wake up. And another fascinating difference about the Mohawk desert. Look, a desert is about divide and conquer. Fighting a desert is about unifying. Very simple. But normally the divide and conquer is along racial lines, especially in the South, when you'll have a higher percentage of blacks in the Union than whites. Because, you know, blacks in the South see the labor movement correctly as an extension of the civil rights movement. But here, that is not where the divide was. The divide was younger workers against older workers. Their pitch to the younger workers, because they'd hired a bunch of new folks in 2016, was that in our non-union plans, seniority means nothing. We simply choose who we think the best workers are to keep during a layoff or to promote during a job vacancy. And so if you get rid of the union, you won't have all these senior people in front of you. And with one exception, all of the people on the anti-union committee were youngsters in their 20s and 30s. And the real question is how to get through to this generation. I mean, an interesting statistic. You know, Facebook gives you really good analytics about who's responding to your posts and who's buying your book, etc. By far, the largest demographic that's been interested in my book has been people between 55 and 64. And you drop into people in their 20s and 30s, and there's hardly any interest because they just don't get it. They inherited what people like you and me and folks from our generation spent our lives fighting for. And they walk into the wages and the benefits and the rights and the working conditions that we fought and bled for and took enormous chances for, went to jail for, and they just take it for granted. They just don't get it, and they don't want to get it. And the real magic here, the silver bullet here, if we're going to revitalize and re-energize the labor movement, is how do we wake up the people in their 20s and 30s before all of us are gone?
And that is the question, and the hope is the beginning of it is your book, Fighting Union Busters in a Carolina Carpet Mill. As I said, we'll get links out on how you can get a copy of that, fightingunionbusters.org, the website of how you can do that as well. I guess that's the $1 million question, and something, Phil, we're going to have to pick up at another time because obviously this isn't going to go away. Obviously something we're going to have to continue to fight for. And great book. I appreciate the time. I look forward to talking to you again, my friend.
I appreciate it. Glad to be here.
Good stuff. Phil Cohen, author of Fighting Union Busters in a Carolina Mill. Make sure you check out his website, fightingunionbusters.org, and pick up a copy of the book. Quick break, right back after this. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk.
The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk.
On this
day in labor history, the year was 2010. That was the day 33 Chilean miners were finally pulled to safety after being trapped for 69 days. Workers had been mining copper and gold 2,300 feet down at the San Jose mine near the northern city of Copiapo when the mine caved in early August. The company waited several hours to notify authorities, and rescue efforts only began 2 days later. Trapped miners initially tried to escape through ventilation shafts, but found the required ladders missing. Each route they attempted was blocked by fallen rock or threatened additional collapse. A state-owned mining company took over the rescue efforts, and soon they began. As geologist Serena Sorensen noted, prospecting for people. Initial exploratory boreholes failed to locate miners because mine shaft maps had never been updated. Rescuers had no idea whether miners were even still alive. Finally, 17 days later, the 8th borehole reached them. The miners tapped on the drill and taped notes to it, alerting rescuers above that they were indeed alive and well. Food, medicine, and other supplies were lowered down to them as rescue efforts intensified. Mini cameras were also lowered down, and miners videotaped messages of their continued ordeal. They told how they continued to search for possible escape routes and agreed to ration their limited food supplies so they could all survive. The first of 3 drilling plans to free the miners began. It was an international effort. The Chilean Navy consulted with NASA to design and construct the rescue pods. Throughout the entire process, rescuers worked to prevent additional cave-ins and rock falls. Finally, the extraction process began, and in less than 48 hours, all miners emerged as heroes.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So lots of fun coming out of Western Pennsylvania as the Patient Zero is there for a super spreader event. I do find a couple of things really funny. I guess at one point he asked suburban women, "Will you please like me?" No. How's that? Quick to the point. I think he's going to lose. I think he's going to lose suburban women in a big way. And to be honest, I'm actually shocked that they ever voted for him in the first place. I know. Maybe I'm not going to go there. Just not going to do it. Although you know where I was going. He also attacked Joe Biden for abandoning the state of Pennsylvania. Joe Biden was 10. But hey, it doesn't matter. It's an attack. It still is what it is. Sad stuff. Good news today, though, and I'm sure everyone missed it because it didn't make much news, but evidently U.S. Attorney John Bash has left the department, left the Department of Justice. I guess he did that last week. We're just now finding out about it now. John Bash's job was to look into his job was to frame up the Obama administration for illegally unmasking people who were redacted out of reports and, find their names and find out who they are from intelligence reports. Evidently, he's wrapped up his work. There are no criminal charges that we can find. There's no public report of any type to be found. He has left. He is done. It's over. And it's kind of sad in a way because I was kind of hoping. Because I'm one of the people who I want Obama to testify. I want the Democrats, Eric Holder and the rest of them, to tell us exactly what went on with Trump and all of his Russian contacts. And I want the American people to put themselves in their position. Because look, and maybe we can get Billy Ray back on the program who wrote the Comey rule. Because, I'll tell you, I despised James Comey. He's the guy who basically handed 2016 to Donald Trump. But in seeing that movie and seeing how they fleshed out the whole discussion, it was one of those moments where I kind of felt sorry for him in a way because he knew from the start that this was a big giant S sandwich, that there was a steaming pile between two pieces of bread. And there was nothing there was no way he could go where he was going to be not ripped to shreds. And I've said from the start, I want to see those people go, look, here's what we were presented with. Here's what, and I think we, the people, need to see some of this stuff and sit back and think about, what would you do? Take Trump out of this entirely. Take the marmalade Mussolini out of it. What would you do if someone came to you and said, look, we've got someone telling us that 5, 6, 7, 10, 12 people associated with this campaign have direct ties to Russian assets, or Chinese, or whomever? Would you want to know more? Do you think there should have been an investigation? Would you have opened an investigation? And I'll tell you, I would have. Because truth of the matter is, as I sat and I thought about putting myself in Comey's position, I most certainly wanted to know what was in the emails. I most certainly wanted to know if she broke the law. I most certainly wanted to know and would have wanted to investigate it, because you can't have this stuff hanging over people's heads. You can't have them in a position where they can be blackmailed. You just can't have it. And I'm hoping someone takes this moment and goes back and maybe writes the book and puts us in these moments. Because evidently we're not going to find anything, because there are no indictments. There are no crimes here. As much as Billy Barr and the Justice Department have dug, as much time, energy, and money as they've looked at flipping over rocks, there's no there. As much as they want John Durham to come out with the smoking gun, and they want perp walks, and they want Obama in handcuffs, it ain't happening, because they didn't break the rules. They did what probably any one of us would do. And that's want to make sure that you don't have a tainted president. I mean, because from the beginning, I can't look at anything Trump does at this moment and not see how it benefits Putin and Russia because of his financial ties. You look at the orb scene with the crown prince and all of them in Saudi Arabia, and knowing that he's so deeply in debt, you can't possibly think that he's not somehow indebted. The fact that they did nothing to Turkey, and the treatment of Erdogan after all of the stuff that happened here with his goons beating people up in D.C. makes you wonder why, how did nothing happen? And you got to come back to, he owes them. So what was supposed to be, the smoking gun, what was supposed to be, the October surprise, what was supposed to be the re-election campaign has fizzled. And as I said, U.S. Attorney John Bash has left the department, gone. Nothing to see here. Move along. But that's not going to stop them from trying. Trust me, there's more coming. And Billy Barr, I'm sure, is working diligently to come up with that one thing. Maybe they can find another guy who changed an email. And, for me, out of all of this, you go, this is the moment where you just stop emailing people. Don't email. Stop it. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Oh, please tell me that there's get me the conspiratory guy out there. Give me the conspiracy nut to tell me, this is Obama's doing. And the FBI's jaded. Trump's FBI is out to get him. Please, share with me that. We'll take a quick break. Right back. Stick around.
Waving the flag of freedom for people, not corporations. Rick Smith.
Hurricane Delta is the 10th named storm to make landfall this year. Hurricane season has nearly 2 months to go. Climate change? What climate change?
Cleanup and recovery begin in battered Louisiana in wake of Hurricane Delta. Plus,
let's talk about who is prepared to lead our country over the course of the next 4 years on what is an existential threat.
Climate change in the spotlight at the one and only 2020 vice presidential debate.
Yay!
And that's not saying much.
Boo! All of those stories and more straight ahead from BradBlog.com. I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
Stand by for 6 minutes of independent green news, politics, analysis, and snarky comment.
On the subject of climate change, Pence made another hollow promise.
We're going to take care of our environment and follow the science.
We will follow it, and once it is asleep, we will smother it with a pillow. It will look like an accident, this much I swear.
No swearing, Mike. This is your Green News Report. Hey, Desi Doyen.
Yes.
At the vice presidential debate, not only did they bring up climate change, but they brought it up in like the first half hour or so. You got to be happy about that.
Well, yes, it's true that the vice presidential debate had a solid 7 minutes about climate change, but it was not an actual substantive debate on either climate change or policy. So, yeah, no, not really.
Nothing is ever good enough for you people, is it?
It can be way better.
Uh-huh.
But first, recovery and cleanup operations are underway in beleaguered, storm-weary Louisiana in the wake of the destructive Hurricane Delta, which slammed into the state on Friday night as a Category 2 hurricane near Lake Charles. Delta hit just a few miles from where Hurricane Laura made landfall just 6 weeks ago, stripping off blue tarps from damaged homes. 3 deaths are linked to the storm. The Washington Post reports that ravaged municipalities are still awaiting word from FEMA on whether they will receive full reimbursement for costs incurred during these 2 hurricanes and how much federal aid they can count on. Delta was the first Greek-named storm to hit the U.S. in recorded history and the 4th to strike Louisiana in 2020.
And why was it a Greek-named storm?
Because we ran out of English-named storms, and now we're into the Greek alphabet.
Cool. What happens after the Greek alphabet?
Armageddon?
Yeah.
Driven by record warm ocean temperatures, Delta broke the record for the fastest intensifying storm in the Atlantic basin. Climate scientists say man-made climate change is increasing the intensity and the frequency of the most dangerous hurricanes. So keep those facts in mind as you hear Republican Vice President Mike Pence at the sole vice presidential debate of the 2020 election held last week in Utah deflect questions about climate science and lie about policy. Moderator Susan Page of USA Today did not ask Pence about the Trump administration's persistent denial of the scientific consensus on climate change. She did not ask about the administration's rollbacks of more than 100 pollution and climate regulations or about Trump's lack of any climate policy. Instead, she went retro to ask Pence if he believed the scientific community.
The climate is changing, but the issue is, what's the cause and what do we do about it? President Trump has made it clear that we're going to continue to listen to the science.
Mike Pence, partying like it's 1999.
Scientists, of course, know what causes climate change, and we know what to do about it, but voters did not hear those solutions. Throughout the debate, Pence ignored questions and instead pivoted to repetitive talking points, invoking the Green New Deal 11 times as if it were a mantra, even on unrelated topics. And he flat out lied about Joe Biden's position on fracking. Senator Kamala Harris defended Biden's positions.
I will repeat, and the American people know, that Joe Biden will not ban fracking. That is a fact.
That is a fact because a president can't ban fracking. Only Congress can do that. But a president can regulate it, which Biden has pledged to do. Also, banning fracking isn't really the point. No one banned coal mining, but it is going away anyway because of market forces. Harris then linked Trump's dismissal of climate science to his failed response to the pandemic that has killed more than 210,000 Americans.
We have seen a pattern with this administration, which is they don't believe in science. And Joe's plan is about saying we're going to deal with it, but we're also going to create jobs.
Senator Harris missed an opportunity to detail Biden's $2 trillion plan to create jobs by transitioning the nation to clean energy, or how it differs from the proposed Green New Deal framework. Polling is extremely consistent that voters overwhelmingly favor climate action, and they do not trust Trump and Republicans to do anything on climate policy. It's unclear if voters understand that Trump and Pence have no plans to address climate change. And with the corporate media still stuck at square one, asking candidates about their beliefs, voters are still not getting the substantive climate policy discussion they need and deserve.
Is that it?
That's it.
That was very good.
Okay.
It was like watching the vice presidential debate all over again, except without all of the boring parts and, of course, without the fly. Other than that, nice job. For much more on these stories and the ones we couldn't get to because of them, check out our website at greennews.bradblog.com. Find, follow, and share us planet-wide on the Facebooks and the Twitters at Green News Report. I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
And this has been your Green News Report.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So I got to tell you, I'm looking at some of the clips from the Trump sideshow. And it's going to be interesting once Obama hits the trail. Evidently, Obama's expected to hit the campaign trail soon for Joe Biden. And it'll be interesting to see what comes out of that. I think, obviously, Obama is an incredible speaker, someone who commands an audience. Joe Biden, to me, is someone who's, look, he's not an entertainer. He's not going to rile me up. What excites me about having Joe Biden in the White House is we don't have Donald Trump there. Number one. Number two, I know all of the attacks on workers are going to stop. I know all of the attacks on women are going to stop. The attacks on consumers are going to stop. All of the regulatory attacks by this administration are going to stop. All of the attacks in the NLRB, as we just talked about with Phil, all of the attacks by the Labor Department going to stop. And maybe we then begin to turn the tide and re-engage and recommit to collective bargaining and expand workers' ability to fight for better wages, hours, conditions, and all of that. That's what excites me, not the idiotic rhetoric that we hear coming out of Donald Trump's mouth, of which 90% of it's total bunk. But there is that. So I'm looking forward to it. And what's interesting is right now is people are actually voting right now. And I've been saying for a while I would like to have a voting month. Yeah, I don't know. I'm at this point where I don't know now, because every day it's all this chaos every day. Like, for instance, in Virginia today, a single cable was cut. One of these fiber optic cables. They're saying it was accidentally. Could have been. I'm not saying anything other than it was accidental. But it shut down online voter registration for several hours today, which because people procrastinate to the last minute. Not a good thing to have 3 weeks out before the election. Evidently, they got it fixed. Evidently, it's back up and running. Also, yesterday, I believe, was the first day of early voting in Georgia, and the lines are around the corner already. And how is it that in certain areas, the lines are around the corner, that they just don't have the kind of allocation of resources that you would need to ensure that everyone gets a chance to vote. Now, they pointed out at 4 o'clock in the morning in Gwinnett County, you had literally people standing in line for 2 hours at 4 a.m., getting in line at 4 a.m. so they could hurry up and vote in the Atlanta State Farm Arena, which is the largest polling place there in the state of Georgia. Evidently, the voting stopped because, whatever cards that they give people to access the vote, evidently the scanners went down. So the more we are relying on technology, the more those technological glitches pop up. But amazingly, already nationwide, 10 million people have voted. I being one of them. As I said, last week, I went to the county elections office. I took my mail-in ballot, and I set it right in the box. In fact, the woman who checked it for me made sure it was all right, that it was, all the signature was there, the box was checked, it's sealed, it's licked. In fact, she had a little thing that helped me. I didn't even have to lick it. She had a little thing that wetted the envelope, closed it right up. She said, put it over there in the box, the state-approved drop box, which I was very happy to do. You know, the state-approved box that Donald Trump was trying to, was suing to not allow. Remember, now remember this, they didn't want Pennsylvania to have approved boxes for drop-offs. Now understand, there are some counties where, you know, you've got the election office in one spot, which could be, you know, 50 miles away. It would be good to have, you know, a box in multiple locations that are in places that, you know, people can keep an eye on them, make sure no shenanigans going on. But Donald Trump and his campaign sued and said, no, we don't want that. Don't want it at all. Can't have it. Except in California, where they are actually, the California GOP is setting up what they're calling official boxes, only they're not official. And the Attorney General of California and the Chief Elections Officer there in the state are now demanding that the Republicans cease and desist, stop using these private ballot boxes. And of which, and I love this because I saw a picture of it. It said official drop box on it. It wasn't official. And this is one of those moments where you go, what would stop the Republicans from putting the official box in, say, I don't know, a heavily Hispanic area, a heavily, you know, African-American neighborhood, in a place where, you know, the registration is overwhelmingly leaning towards Democrats. And who's to say all those ballots make it? This is why I think we have to have official drop places. I think we have to have drop places that if you fiddle with it, you go to prison for a long time. Like this mailman in New Jersey who, you know, Donald Trump is, you know, see, fraud. No, not fraud. Lazy mailman. Lazy mailman threw the mail away. There were 99 ballots in there. You're right. Lazy mailman. Throw lazy mailman in jail. To me, that's simple. Never let him see the light of day again. You want to start making examples of people? That's where we start. To me, the ballot box is sacrosanct. And look, I love the idea of having a drop-off box. I love the idea of having them in official locations, in government buildings, to where you go and you drop it off. You have your hand-marked paper ballot. You drop it off anytime you want. Seems sane and rational to me. And then once it's scanned in, you get a response back saying you got it. I put my ballot in. This tells you how incredible Pennsylvania is. I put my ballot in the box. 2 days later, I got an email saying, hey, we got your ballot. We got it. It's right here. Confirmed. It's right there. We can do that. And, you know, because I keep going, see, there's all this fraud going on. Rick, see, I got 5 ballots. I go, okay, so you got 5 ballots. Good for you. I wouldn't send all 5 of them in because your name has got to be on it for it to count. You have to sign it, and you have to attest that you're only voting once. So if you do vote more than once, that's punishable by 5 years in prison, and you never get to vote ever again. Is it worth that one extra vote? Is it worth you taking that risk? And the answer is voter fraud by the average everyday person is virtually impossible to find. It's always some nitwit who does something stupid. There's always one. They try, and guess what? We find out about it because they get caught. And when they get caught, we throw them in jail. And this is one of those moments where you go, look, I'm all in favor of dropping things off, and I'm all in favor of having it tallied. In fact, you know, the way Pennsylvania does it, I may never show up to the polling place again. The fact that they sent me the email going, hey, we got it. It's gonna be counted. It's in the batch. And it's hand marked. We can actually go back and count that. We can count it 100 times. We can count it over and over and over again. In 100 years, they can go back and count it. Big fan of it. Big fan of it. But some good news. You know, I'm looking at some polling. This could be a great election year. It really could be, especially, you know, as Republicans continue to ram through the Supreme Court nominee, and continue to get nothing done on the stimulus, and the economy not doing great. And you've got motor mouth Trump out there just blathering on nonsense, which I don't know how you sit and listen to for 2 hours, but I guess cult of personality. But I'm looking at some of these races, and could be a very good year for Democrats, especially in the Senate. There are a lot of them that could flip. There are people saying we need to take 3 seats for a 50-50 split, and if they win the White House, you get a Kamala Harris tiebreaker. That's okay with me. But North Carolina, I've been saying for a while, North Carolina could be one of those. Wow, North Carolina. Tom Tillis is, just doing terribly. In fact, the most recent poll has Cal Cunningham up by 10 points over the incumbent Tillis. Now, remember, this is after the sex scandal. I don't know if it was an actual sex scandal. They found what they described as romantic text messages with a woman that wasn't his wife. Whether there was something going on or not, you can, if you need to let that bang around between your ears, go ahead and do that. I don't care. I don't care what people do behind the confines of their 4 walls with consenting adults. It's none of my business. Between him and his wife and his maker. Don't care. But interesting. Gonna see possibly North Carolina turn blue, which would be fantastic. That would be a great place to pick up. There's also some other places. The Cook Report has moved a couple of Senate races over. You've got Georgia that's kind of moving. You've got Texas that's moving. You've got even Alaska, which was a likely Republican seat, is now a lean Republican. I think they're going to keep that seat. I don't see that flipping. But the fact that it's even more, it's competitive, pretty remarkable to me. Just one of those things where you go, wow, that's. Also, Texas, which was a likely Republican, is now a lean Republican, as John Cornyn is seeking re-election over MJ Hager. I thought that was nowhere near possible. And Kelly Loeffler, who I'm really hoping just gets creamed. Now it's from a lean Republican to a toss-up with against the Democrat. Raphael Warnock and Matt Lieberman. They got a weird system down there. But it'll be interesting to see who comes out of this. I expect there to be a runoff, and I guess January 5th there'll be the runoff, because you have to have 50% plus 1 in order to be the winner. And look, Kelly Loeffler, she was given that seat. So it'd be good to see her go. But there's some other ones that are out there. Colorado, I expect to flip. I expect Arizona to flip. McSally, another one who was handed her seat. I expect the astronaut Mark Kelly to win there. Maine is a possible, looking fairly good. After all, Susan Collins not been the greatest. It would be fabulous for me to see Joni Ernst tossed in Iowa, because Ernst's seat was held for years by a really incredible labor guy, Tom Harkin. And Harkins was one of those guys. I had interviewed him about, I guess it's going back about 10, 12 years. And he told me this story, basically the story of his life, but he has a brother who is mentally diminished. I don't know how you put that, but he's got like a 90 IQ. And he told the story of how, this job that he had for years, a union job, that they gave him the dignity and the respect to earn a good living, that he could support himself. Not even make a huge amount of money, but he made enough that he could support himself. And they had a job for him. And that, that was, for him and his family was just, an incredible thing that his brother didn't have to be institutionalized. Now remember, this is going back to the time when, when folks were in the 80s and 90s, they locked them up and stored them away somewhere. So the fact that, the company and the union came together and were able to find something for him, I think it was an incredible story. And he was, Harkin was a huge defender of labor. And to have someone like Ernst take his place, just flipped me out. So it'd be good to see it flip back the other way. Also, Georgia, David Perdue's running for re-election. There's a chance that John Ossoff could throw him out. Montana could flip blue. The incumbent Steve Daines is kind of in trouble because, look, they got the former governor Steve Bullock running. Which, again, if you remember during the presidential campaign, I'm like, why is Bullock on the stage? I like him. Why is he on the presidential stage? Get your butt back to Montana, run for Senate, and he's making a race of it. Now understand, Trump won Montana by like 20 points. And going to be a tough race. But Montana's one of those weird places where they do split their ticket. So I'm really hoping Bullock takes that off. I'm hoping Harrison beats Lindsey Graham in South Carolina. And if you see some of these seats flipping, I can see the Democrats popping off with maybe 52, 53 seats, which would be enormous. You want to talk about a mandate? That would most certainly be a mandate. And I think we need that as a country. We need to push back on what's happened these last 4 years. As a country, we need to collectively shake off this virus and the people who brought it to us, and the people who are irresponsible, and the people who are inept. Remember, the people who are in charge of the White House and of the Senate are people who tell you that government can't work, that they don't believe government can do anything right. And here they are proving it. And I've said for years, the reality is Republicans are the party of, we don't believe in government, we don't believe it can do anything, and we're going to show you that. We're going to prove it to you by boogering everything up we touch. I had this interesting conversation with a guy today who said, well, I'm voting for the Republicans because they're the party of fiscal responsibility. And I literally almost had iced tea coming out of my nose. I mean, get that image, because he says it to me. I'm on the phone. He says it to me, and it was kind of a burst into laughter while drinking the iced tea, and it literally, I thought I was going to drown. I thought it was going to shoot out my nose, and I'm like, "Are you kidding? You don't realize that Donald Trump has run 3 consecutive years in a row, $1 trillion plus deficits every year, and then this year." And before I could get that out, he goes, well, that's because of the virus. I go, no. That has nothing to do with the virus. The virus caused us to have a $3.1 trillion deficit. Well beyond the $1 trillion. But we were going to have a $1 trillion deficit no matter what. And guess what? We were going to have one next year, and the year after, and the year after, and the year after, because of Donald Trump's tax cuts, because of the tax cuts you think you got, that you expire in 2025. You know whose tax cuts don't expire in 25? That's right, Donald Trump's. And oddly enough, Donald Trump doesn't pay any taxes. So it's really just, it's one of those weird moments. And I'm hoping that we find some bit of sanity, that as a country we start talking about what is a fair tax code. Should the secretary pay more than the owner of the company? Should the person sweeping the streets pay more than the CEO? I don't think so. My mind says we go back to the days of the cave, where the bigger your shoulders, the more water you carry back to the cave. That's simple. We need health care. We know that Amy Coney Barrett, once she gets on the Supreme Court, and I rarely say I absolutely know, but beyond exception, she is going to be that deciding vote. And I foresee a 6-3 court going 5-4 on this decision, and Barrett being that deciding vote, without question. And then the chaos that comes with that. Also, since I brought up Amy Coney Barrett, oddly enough today during the hearing, would not commit to recusing herself from an election case. Which, you kind of go, there's certain moments where you go, look, if this president's involved, being so close to being on the, I most certainly have to recuse myself, because there kind of is a conflict of interest there. she refused to do that. Also said that Roe isn't a quote-unquote super precedent, which means that it can be overturned. That would be code for, I'm absolutely going to overturn it. I can't wait to smash it with a hammer and move us back 100 years or 50 years. This is where we are, folks. Sad and scary times. And tomorrow's another day of hearings. Tomorrow is another day of fun and excitement. Cannot wait. Oh boy. But here we are, ticking down the days to Election Day. I hope you've registered to vote. I hope you have a plan on how you're going to vote. I hope you execute that vote. Because at the end of the day, we all have to exercise our civil liberty and our ability to exercise our franchise. Thanks so much for tuning in. We'll see you back here next time.
You've been listening to The Rick Smith Show. Email Rick at rick@thericksmithshow.com.